you ever looked up into the sky and felt something looking back? Not with eyes, but with sorrow. Have you ever dreamed of lights too quiet to name, scattered like forgotten seeds across the heavens? They say the stars are far, but that is only true for the body. For the spirit, they are a memory, close as breath. In the days before the first brick was laid upon dust, before the river curled her fingers into cities and laws, there were beings who walked the dark with light upon their faces. They are not remembered in scrolls. No temple bears their names. But in the hush before dawn, in the soft lapse between sleep and waking, they are seen. Faces made of silver flame, eyes like moons reflected in still water. They are called the star-faced ones, and it is said they came not to rule, but to mourn. Their feet left no prints, but the earth felt them. Their breath shaped the reeds, their silence bent the wind. And in one valley where time had not yet chosen its name, a single star-faced one descended, not from above, but from within the sky itself, as though the heavens sighed and let go, a tear made living. He was called Ishkali, though names then were more feeling than form. Ishkali walked with the rhythm of stars, slow, circular, inevitable. He came not in glory, but in dusk. Where he passed, children fell asleep smiling, though they knew not why. Birds tilted their heads toward nothing. Trees held their leaves a little longer, as though waiting for a word that might never come, but even such ones as he could be touched by longing. In the village where the sun did not yet rise with precision, where shadows bled into each other like ink into linen, there lived a weaver girl who sang as she worked. Her name was Ene, which meant hush in the oldest tongue. She sang not with melody, but with thread. Each woven line was a hum, each knot a sigh. She did not know she was seen, but Ishkali saw. He came to her not as a god, nor as a man, but as a hush of starlight on her doorstep. At first she thought it was a trick of morning. The light that clung to him was gentle, soft as mist. She did not flinch. Her eyes held the peace of those who walk often in dreams. "Why do you look at me?" she asked, not with her lips, but with her gaze. And though Ishkali could not speak as men do, she heard his answer, "Because your silence is older than mine." Night after night he came. He never entered her home. He never crossed the threshold of her weaving room, but he stood just beyond, where the shadows pool thickest, and watched the songs she pulled from thread. Her hands told stories, her cloths rippled with quiet myths. Serpents curled around unborn moons, rivers that rose to kiss the stars, women made of wind who never aged. She was not a priestess. She had no teacher. But somehow she remembered. One night she looked up at him and asked, "Are you a god?" And the light on his face dimmed, not with shame, but with memory. "I have stood beside gods," he answered, in the way water answers a hand that touches it. "But I am not one." "Then what are you?" she asked. He stepped forward, only half a pace, and the wind ceased. The birds fell silent. Even the flame in her clay lamp bent toward him. "I am what was forgotten," he said. She nodded, not in fear, but in recognition. "Then stay," she whispered, "for I have remembered you." And so it was. For a time they shared silence. He never touched her, not once. But in the way she tied her knots more slowly, in the way he lingered longer with each dusk, there was communion, a thread drawn between stars and earth. But the world does not like stillness. One evening, the village elder, a man whose hands shook from holding too many truths, saw Ishkali watching. He told no one, but he marked the sand outside Ene's hut with crushed ash and murmured a word. "I do not know what you are," he whispered to the wind, "but you are not for this world." That night, Ishkali came later than usual. The stars above him flickered as if grieving. "I must go," he said, and his light pulsed faintly blue. Ene stood still. Her loom was half finished, the thread still loose like thoughts not yet spoken. "Why?" she asked. "Because remembrance draws envy," he replied, "and the world cannot hold too much of the sky." She looked at him with a sorrow deeper than words. "Then take this," she said, and she cut a single thread from her loom, golden, thin, glowing faintly with the hush of her touch. She tied it around her wrist, then reached out and tied the other end around nothing. But the nothing held it. And in that moment, something ancient woke. The stars above spun faster, as if stirred by her courage. A tremor moved through the soil, not of fear, but of memory returning to bone. Ishkali looked down at the thread and whispered, "You are more than you know." He leaned forward, their foreheads nearly touched. "I will return when the stars forget their names," he said, "for that is when silence will be most needed." And he vanished, not with wind, not with light, but with breath, as though the world exhaled and forgot it had ever held him. Enna never wept. She wove, and the cloths she made after that shimmered in ways that no torchlight could explain. Those who wore them dreamed more deeply. Those who touched them heard songs from before their birth. And one child, wrapped in a blanket she made, spoke his first word at dawn, Ishkali. They say the star-faced ones left because the earth became too loud, but some say they did not leave, only folded inward, into shadow, into lullaby, into silence. And Enna's thread still hums. Somewhere. In the breath between stars, in the hush before sleep, in the corners of your dream that feel too soft to be only dream. What did she truly give him in that thread? Was it her memory, her heart, or something far older, the silence that births stories? No one knows. But in the stillness of night, if you close your eyes and listen not with ears, but with longing, you may hear it. A footstep without weight, a gaze without form, a thread stretching still between the stars and this quiet earth. But the mists hold another tale. Have you ever stood at the edge of water and wondered if it remembers you? Not your name, not your face, but the part of you that dreamt long before you were born. They say rivers are just water moving through earth, but not this river, not the Euphrates. This river listens, this river swallows. And sometimes, when the moon is wrong and the air is too still, this river forgets to give things back. They say once, long ago, it forgot its own name. This is not the tale of how that happened. This is the tale of why. Long before maps laid lines upon the world, before merchants named the corners of rivers with ink and trade, there stood two cities on either bank of the Euphrates. Sisters, yet not friendly. Mirrors, yet not kind. The eastern one was called Kasur, the western one, Namatu. Between them flowed the river, deep as a wound, slow as old breath. Each city claimed the river's blessing. Each built temples and altars along its edge, tossing offerings wrapped in gold leaf and papyrus into the murk. Children were taught that the river was a god, older than the gods carved in stone, a silent watcher who drank without complaint. But gods, even silent ones, notice envy. And envy was thick in the hearts of Kasur's kings. One king in particular, Lugaletana, who wore a crown made from the jawbone of a lion and robes dyed with the black of night, wanted not only to rule Kasur, but to erase Namatu from the skin of the world. "You cannot rule what still remembers itself," he said, tracing a dagger along the rim of his throne. "Memory is defiance." So he turned to the river. Each night for 7 days, he walked alone to the banks, barefoot and draped in silence. He brought no incense, no priest, only a sealed jar and a whisper. The whisper carried the true name of Namatu, a name older than its streets, older than its brick, a name carved in the bones of its first mother, a name the king had taken from a dying oracle with silver eyes. On the 7th night, he opened the jar and poured the name into the river. Not the word, the name itself, the soul of it. The river shuddered. For 3 nights the water boiled in place. Fish turned belly up. Crops wilted at the edge. The river did not flood nor recede. It simply thickened like thought becoming regret. Then Namatu began to fade. Not burn, not fall, just unravel. Streets lost their shape. Walls forgot their mortar. People walked and forgot where they were going or where they had come from. A woman searching for her child forgot she'd ever borne one. A baker kneaded air, thinking it was dough. The great bronze bell in the center of the market square began ringing itself, soft, sorrowful, and slow. Until one day, it was no longer there. No one spoke of it. No one remembered there was something to speak of. Even the maps redrew themselves. Lugal Etana watched from his palace window and smiled, but he did not understand what he had awakened. The river had not taken the name as tribute. It had tasted it, and it had become hungry. First Namatu, then its villages, then its songs. One morning, a shepherd from the north came to Qasr with panic in his throat. "The village of Irim is gone," he said. "The goats wandered into empty air. There are no wells, there are no paths, just dust where a cradle once lay." Lugal Etana said nothing, but that night he dreamed of a river with teeth. He dismissed it. Dreams are soft things, he thought. He was a king. But by the full moon, another city had gone. Then another, not destroyed, not conquered, gone, vanished like a whisper between waking and sleep. Soon even Qasr's outer farms began to wilt. A boy went to fetch water and returned with an empty pot and no eyes. He wept for a mother he could not name. The king grew afraid. He called the priests of every temple. He offered oxen, gold, his own blood. But the river did not care for gifts anymore. It had tasted something deeper than gold, something softer than flesh. It had tasted identity. And once a river learns to forget, it cannot help but hunger for more. The king went back to the bank. Now cracked and shivering, he knelt, he wept, he whispered, "Please." But the water did not whisper back. A voice behind him did. It was the voice of a woman, rough as sand, soft as dusk. "You gave it a name," she said, "but did you ask what it wanted?" He turned. She was wrapped in black reeds, her eyes clouded but wide. She carried no staff, no scroll, only a fishing net, woven from river wind and old silence. "I am called Nada," she said, "and I have lived with the river longer than memory." The king bowed his head. Not out of reverence, but because he could no longer remember how to stand proud. "What have I done?" he asked. "Undone," she replied. "You unstitched a seam that held more than thread." "Can it be mended?" he asked. "Not with power," she said, "not with force, only with offering." "I have offered all," he whispered. "Not all," she said. "Not your name." The king froze. His lips trembled. A man's name is his soul, a king's name is his crown. But the river rumbled, a sound like weeping through stone. So he stood, he stepped into the water, and he spoke his name. It was not the name the people knew. It was not the name on the tablets or the altars. It was the first name. The one his mother whispered before death took her. The one only the wind remembered. He gave it to the river, and the water drank it. He vanished, not in agony, not in fire, but in unmaking. The way dreams end. The way morning forgets. The river paused, then sighed. Its hunger did not vanish, but it slept. Cities remained. Namatu did not return, but it was mourned. And Nadaa, the fisherwoman, sat at the edge of the current and sang lullabies made of silence and breath. To this day, the river remains quiet. But sometimes, when the fog curls low and names slip your tongue too easily, you may feel it stir. A pull, soft but endless. because it is said the Euphrates still remembers what it forgot. And it waits. What did the river see in that king's name? Was it regret? Was it love? Or was it the final truth, that every name is borrowed from silence? We do not know, but step gently when you walk near rivers. They listen, they dream, and sometimes they remember that forgetting is a kind of power. And further still, there is one more story. Have you ever heard the sound of a lullaby sung in reverse? Not sung aloud, but hummed inside your chest, where grief sleeps and will not be named. There are gods of light, gods of harvest, storm and fire. Their names were carved into pillars and sung across cities. But there are other names. Names that live in corners, beneath breath, in the places where lamps tremble and mothers do not sleep. One of those names is Lamashtu. She was not always feared. They say she once walked upright among the goddesses of healing, her hands gentle, her voice soft as milk poured from a clay bowl. Her touch eased fevers, her steps cooled the earth. But her name changed. Or perhaps the world changed around it. They say her child was taken, stolen by a god who desired perfection, a shining, golden thing too delicate to be held by a mother made of dusk. She screamed once, only once, and the sound bent the sky. After that, she did not weep. She wandered through alleys slick with sleep, through shadows that had no walls, through the thoughts of women whose arms ached with absence. Lamashtu did not curse children. She carried them, but her arms, hollow with loss, grew hungry. And so it was said, she steals babes from their cradles. She drinks the milk from a nursing mother's breast. She whispers into sleeping mouths and leaves behind silence. But not all believe that tale. In a village where the wind forgot to blow and the dates never sweetened, there lived a woman named Ashana. Her belly had swelled 4 times, but no child lived long enough to know the sun. The people pitied her, until they feared her. They said Lamashtu followed her. They said she was marked, but Ashana did not hide. Each night she lit a lamp beside her bed and sang, not to ward off the demon, but to invite her. "Come," she whispered, "I know your sorrow." On the 7th night, when the moon was a silver scar, Lamashtu came. She did not knock, she did not cry. She entered like mist. Ashana looked up. The shadows grew longer. Her lamp flickered as if ashamed. And there Lamashtu stood, not monstrous, not terrible, but cloaked in grief made flesh. Her eyes were deep wells, and in them swam the shapes of lost children. Her hair flowed like the river before memory. Her hands trembled, not with rage, but with remembering. Ashana did not look away. "Why do you call me?" Lamashtu asked, her voice like rain on a burnt stone. "Because I am hollow," Ashana said, "and so are you." The shadow mother paused. "No one speaks to me with kindness. No one remembers your sorrow," Ashana replied. There was silence, long and soft. Then Lamashtu moved, closer, slower than breath. She reached out one hand and touched Ashana's belly, and inside something stirred, a warmth, a pulse, not of life, but of remembrance. "Your child will be born," Lamashtu said, "but not for this world." "What do you mean?" Ashana asked. "The child will see both sides, the seen and the veiled. She will never be safe, but she will never be blind." Ashana wept, but not from fear. "Then let it be so." Lamashtu bent low and placed her lips upon the woman's brow, a kiss colder than the grave, warmer than love. And she vanished. The villagers said the child would die, but she did not. She was born in silence, her eyes open, her fingers curled as if remembering something she had not yet touched. Ashana named her Silu, which means breath between. Silu grew, quietly. She spoke little, but listened always. She walked between shadows as if greeting old friends. No harm ever came to her, nor to those she watched over. Years later, when mothers feared their cribs and offered charms to ward off Lamashtu, Ashana would smile softly. "She does not need to be warded," she would say. "She needs to be remembered." And in secret, some women lit tiny lamps beside their beds, not to banish Lamashtu, but to honor her. They sang lullabies not from scrolls, but from sorrow, songs that held no melody, only memory, songs that wrapped around pain like cloth around a wound. And sometimes, in the flicker of the flame, a figure would appear, watching, weeping, blessing, not with words, with silence. What did Lamashtu see in Ashana's womb? Was it hope, or was it the mirror of her own grief? Perhaps both. Perhaps that is the only way healing begins, not by forgetting, but by holding grief in the open air. They say Lamashtu still walks, but now she does not steal. She stands watch, over the forgotten, the hollow, the ones whose lullabies were never sung. If you wake in the night and feel a breath on your cheek, soft, cold, known, do not fear. It may be the whisper mother, and she remembers you, but listen. There is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever stood before stone older than your language and felt it breathing, not with wind, not with sound, but with a stillness so deep it presses against the bones of your chest? There are places where time forgets to move, where the air is thick with incense that no priest remembers lighting, where silence pools in the corners, heavy as oil, waiting. In Babylon, those places lie beneath the ziggurats. The great stepped temples climbed skyward in layers of prayer and dust, their bricks pressed by hands long returned to soil. But beneath them, beneath the stairways of offering and the sanctuaries of flame, there are chambers that have no name, no floor, no breath. They are not tombs, they are not prisons, they are waiting mouths. And in one such hollow space, a king slumbers, or something that was once a king. His name was Urash-Zel, a ruler of the high ziggurat in the third age of whispers, before the star-faced visitors left and before the river took its first name. He was beloved at first. His face was carved into lapis. His voice could hush lions. His fingers blessed grain and moon alike. But Urash feared death. Not like other men, not in the soft way of wrinkled hands or dimming sight, but with the terror of a mirror that refuses to reflect. He visited every priest, drank every elixir, bathed in sacred smoke until his skin was pale with incense. But none could offer him eternity. None except one. She came at dusk, veiled in blue reeds, her voice a whisper even when she screamed. "I offer you a life that never ends," she said, "but not a throne." "I want no throne," he lied, "only breath." She showed him a fang, long as a forearm, coiled in obsidian dust. "Drink," she said, "and leave your name behind." The king hesitated only a moment, then drank. The pain came not in fire, but in memory. He forgot his birth, his father's voice, his lover's song, all peeled away like skin shed in spring. He crawled, he slithered, he split in silence. His eyes, once brown as soil, turned to gold. His spine stretched, his limbs folded inward, and beneath the ziggurat, he descended, not into death, but into coil. Stone sealed behind him. No door, no tablet, only myth. But the story did not end. Centuries later, when the world above changed, when kings wore silk instead of lions and called to foreign gods, a child was born in a mud house beside the broken temple wall. His name was Tammuz. He could not speak. The midwife said he would be nothing, but the boy sang, not with voice, but with breath. When wind passed through his lips, it changed. Birds fell silent. Flames danced backward. Dust turned to mist. He grew without words, but was never alone. Shadows followed him. Cats bowed to him, and when he touched old stone, it hummed. One day, wandering through a tunnel half buried in vine and ash, he found the forgotten stair beneath the ziggurat, a path no priest dared walk. He felt no fear, only recognition. The air grew thick, walls dripped without water, symbols flickered, not etched but floating, as if remembered by the stone itself. And at the bottom, curled like a question too old to answer, was the king. A serpent longer than any tree, scaled in dusk, crowned in bone. But the eyes, they wept. The boy knelt, reached, touched, and in that instant the ziggurat trembled. Not from collapse, but from memory. Urash-Zel remembered his name. He saw the field where he first walked barefoot. He saw the boy he once was, staring at the stars, whispering to the dust. The serpent opened its mouth, but no sound came. Only a sigh. Only peace. Then it curled tighter, turned inward, and turned to stone. Tammuz rose. The shadows bowed. He returned to the surface. He never spoke, but the birds sang songs in languages no one knew. And sometimes, when he sat beside the temple, the old stones wept dew, salt and soft, like tears from a stone heart. They say the king still rests beneath, not dead, not dreaming, but waiting, not to rise again, but to be forgiven. What did the serpent see in the boy? Was it his own childhood, returned in mercy? Was it death, wearing the face of kindness? Or was it simply time, the only thing that can soften even the hardest curse? No one knows, but if you ever find yourself beneath stone where air stands still and memory grows heavy, listen. The silence may hiss, the shadows may shift, and a golden eye may open, not in hunger, but in hope. Yet still the breath of old things calls us onward. Have you ever seen a door that leads nowhere? Not a door carved in stone or painted with sigils, but a door that opens only in memory and silence. They say at the edge of the city, where dust settles like forgotten prayers, there is a gate without a temple. No steps, no arch, no threshold. A gate that is both there and not, a breath between worlds. And each dawn, just before the light softens the air, a woman appears by that gate. She is called the Mirror Woman. Her face is smooth as polished silver, reflecting not what is, but what was, and what might never be. No one knows where she comes from or where she goes when the sun rises. But they say if you watch her long enough, your own reflection will blur and your memories will shift like water. In a quiet quarter of the city lived Belatu, a scribe who wrote not history, but forgotten stories. His hands traced letters as if chasing shadows, and his nights were filled with dreams he could not name. One evening, after the lanterns had been doused and the city was wrapped in the hush of sleep, Belatu heard a soft tapping. At his window stood the Mirror Woman, her silver face unreadable, her eyes deep as night. "Why do you watch me?" he asked, though his voice was barely a whisper. She smiled, or something like it, a flicker of light shifting on her face. "Because you seek what is lost," she said, though her lips did not move. Curious and unafraid, Belatu followed her through the twisting streets to the temple-less gate. The air grew thick with fog and the scent of dust and forgotten incense. The gate shimmered like a veil. She stepped through, and so did he. But the world beyond was not the one he knew. It was a place of echoes, of half-spoken words and fading faces. Streets wound in impossible. Loops and shadows held hands with light in quiet dance. Belatu saw himself not as he was, but as he once dreamed. He saw lovers lost and songs unsung. He saw memories slip through his fingers like water. The Mirror Woman led him through this land of half-truths and quiet sorrows. She showed him the city as it remembered itself. Not grand or proud, but fragile and breathing. The dust beneath feet was not dead, but alive with stories waiting to be heard. "Why show me this?" Belatu asked. Because stories are mirrors, she said, and mirrors hold the soul. He reached out to touch her face, and his hand passed through silver as if it were water. Yet he felt warmth. In that moment, Belatu understood. The gate was not a passage to another place, but a journey inward, into the self, into memory, into the spaces between who we are and who we might have been. When dawn broke, he found himself back in the city. The gate vanished as if it had never been. The mirror woman was gone too, but her presence lingered, like a hush in the wind, a shimmer in the stone. Belatu returned to his writing, but now the stories flowed with a new breath. They were soft, unspoken truths that carried the weight of things forgotten and the lightness of things remembered. Sometimes, when the city sleeps and the fog curls low, a silvery face can be glimpsed at the edge of a dream. And if you are lucky, you might catch her gaze. Not a mirror reflecting you back, but an invitation to remember who you have forgotten. What does the mirror woman see when she looks at you? Is it your past, your future, or the space between, the quiet where all stories begin? No one knows. But in the silence that follows, you may feel a gentle pull, a thread stretched between here and nowhere, a whisper calling you home. But the wind has not yet finished its song. Have you ever felt the sky turn its face away from the world? Not with thunder or rage, but with quiet mourning, a silence so deep it presses on the chest like the weight of all forgotten things. They say the gods once walked Babylon, their footsteps ringing through marble halls and echoing across sunlit courtyards. Their laughter was a song that held the city together, a promise carved in stone and sung by the river, but even gods are not immune to sorrow. One night, beneath a moon veiled in ash, the gods gathered on the highest ziggurat. Their faces, once radiant, were drawn and pale. Their voices, once thunderous, were soft as prayer. They wept, not for the city's enemies, nor for the battles lost, but for Babylon itself, for the dust that would cover her bones, for the silence that would swallow her songs. The city's streets held their breath. The stars blinked uncertainly. The river curled in closer as if to listen. Among the gods was a child, nameless, without clan or crown. She stood apart, watching, her eyes deep pools of unspoken things. She sang. Her voice was fragile, a thread pulled through the vastness. It wove through the night like a balm, a lullaby meant not for the gods, but for the city itself. Her song held no power but its own truth. The gods listened, and slowly, one by one, they laid down their grief. They turned their faces back to the world, but not with triumph, with surrender. The earth softened, the sand swallowed statues and temples alike. The river carried away the last prayers on silent currents. Babylon was gone, but not lost, because stories endure where stone and flesh cannot. The nameless child's song drifted on the wind, carried across deserts and time. It reached ears that did not know they listened, hearts that did not know they remembered. In that song was the promise of return, not as conquest nor as empire, but as breath, as hush, as the quiet folding of day into night. They say if you walk the desert at twilight, when the light is soft and the wind is a sigh, you can hear her voice. A song without words, a memory without end, a promise not of beginnings, but of continuance. And so the gods wept, not to destroy, but to bless. Not with fury, but with love. Because even when all seems lost, there is still the hush of story. And in story, we live. The night breathes slow and the stars fold their silver eyes. In the hush between waking and dreaming, the ancient stories drift like mist over the river's edge. Soft as whispered prayers, deep as the river's own silence. They say the gods may sleep, the kings may turn to stone, and the rivers may forget their names. But stories never fade. They live in the breath of the wind, the curve of a shadow, the quiet touch of memory's hand. They are the threads that bind the world's forgotten corners, the echoes that sing beneath the dust. So rest now, in the tender fold of night. Let the silence hold you like a sacred song. Know that the star-faced ones still watch, that the river still remembers, that the whisper mother still waits. And when you drift deeper, beyond this waking, you carry these stories with you, not as weight, but as light. For in the end, we are all made of ancient silence, woven through with the breath of forgotten myths.